Hi everyone. Hello. So what I thought I would talk about today is just give you a bit of background on me and the company that I set up a few years back, Pure Grass Films, and in particular talk about Beyond the Rave, which is an online series that we launched on MySpace in April this year. And I mean, it's such a small group. I think please feel free at any time to just sort of ask questions, and let's make it very interactive. Just in terms of a bit of background on me and the company. We started in 2005. Before that, I was at Sony Pictures for 4 years, and I was looking after their small digital team in Europe, so doing things like creating content that would go out on wireless networks based around movies and TV shows, and exploring partnerships with portals and hard drive, device manufacturers, let's say. So I sort of had a bit of digital background, but I was excited about the idea of creating a company to focus on short-form entertainment for reasons that are probably pretty obvious. I mean, just the huge audience on YouTube beginning to emerge, with a great amount of user-generated content, but perhaps not so much professionally produced content, which felt like a bit of an opportunity. And also the sense that as that audience migrated online, advertising dollars that historically might have been spent on television would begin to go online, which obviously they have done over the last 3 years. There's sort of, Google is the biggest platform, I think, isn't it, in the UK for advertising now. And I guess our hunch was that some of that advertising spend would be diversified away from search advertising towards video. And I think as well that's sort of beginning to happen. So we thought that it would be great if we could create episodic, sort of serialized entertainment franchises, fund them in part at least with money from advertisers, but also look to monetize the content on other platforms, potentially in a re-edited form. So we might adapt an online series and make it into a movie or make it into a TV show. And then also we could come back and remake the same concept in a prequel or a sequel at a higher budget. That was sort of the concept for the company. And I set it up with my brother. His background was in advertising. There are now 5 of us based here in London. And we, as a company, we had an investment from Endemol in March of this year, which was a great boost and has helped us sort of accelerate our development efforts and option things and all sorts of good stuff, but also to get access to companies that we found it difficult to talk to as a very small startup. So Endemol have been fantastic with introductions to broadcasters and sponsors and that sort of thing. And we also have a lady called Erica Motley on our board. Erica was the head of acquisitions at UIP for several years and worked for Fox and HBO before that. She's based in New York. And the actor Damian Lewis is an investor in the company. And Damian, some of you may know from Band of Brothers, and he's doing this show Life, which is about to come on ITV3. So that's just a little bit about sort of where we've come from. We've done 3 series in the time that we've been going. The first one we made for $15,000 and sort of completely bootstrapped it ourselves and shot it in LA. And it was a martial arts thing called Urban Defender. And we worked with this wonderful guy, George from Rio, who's like a cage fighter. And the concept for that show was that George would defend people from the sort of mean characters on the streets. So it's all sorts of, wham, bam, and gah! And then he sort of explains to you how he bashes them up. So that was how we got started. That was the first thing I'd ever produced. I'd always been doing more sort of business jobs before rather than production roles. And we managed to license the rights to that to a mobile company here in London called Player X, who you may know. And that was 6 one-minute episodes, and just kind of got the ball rolling a little bit. And then the second thing that we produced in 2006 was a horror series called When Evil Calls. And When Evil Calls was a bit bigger. There were 20 episodes that were 3 minutes each. And that was funded by the Horror Channel, the Horror Channel based in the UK rather than the US one. And we always thought of that as something that would go out on mobile as well, but we got some extra money from the Horror Channel and shot some additional footage with Sean Pertwee in it, the guy you may know from Dog Soldiers, and then we managed to license the rights to a sort of compilation to Sony Pictures in the UK and Lionsgate in America. So that was a sort of a feature film based on When Evil Calls, and we made that for less than £100,000. So just, you know, sort of real, again, low budget hustling stuff. But we were lucky enough to find a super director called Joe Roberts who'd made 3 low budget feature films that had all had sort of studio distribution on DVD, and Joe was able to mobilize a super crew of people, and so we got that done.
So sorry, when you say
yeah.
licensed by Sony and Lionsgate,
Yeah. On DVD. So yeah, it was released in the UK in, I think, June. It came out as a DVD, and Lionsgate released it in January this year. And so Beyond the Rave, which I'm about to talk about, was the third thing that we'd done. And I suppose we had a little bit of experience, but not a lot in making these sorts of productions. Oh, there's a picture of When Evil Calls. You can see a sort of evil clown. I suppose just in terms of some of the other talent that was involved, you may know Dominique Pinon, who was in Amélie and Delicatessen, this fantastic French actor, and Chris Barry from Red Dwarf, and Rick Warden, who was in Band of Brothers, and he's about to be in this new BBC horror series. And then I think, you know, one of the things we've tried to do is work with people that, well, obviously very talented, but may also have some sort of, you know, marketing and publicity value. So Sean Brosnan is one of Pierce's sons, and Lois is Ray's daughter, and Vicky Blows is sort of a Maxim model and FHM model, and so we were pleased that we were able to assemble that talented group of people for a relatively low budget. And I think if, you know, some of you are filmmakers, you know, I'm sure you found the same thing yourselves, but it is possible to pull something together that it doesn't cost the earth.
And the budget for this was it equity, or how was it?
It was cash. Yeah, we didn't have anyone on deferrals. I mean, some people we put on net profits, you know, and that's obviously a useful thing to use with bigger name talent to give them some share of the upside, and you know, with directors as well, who are sort of key people in this. But no, the Horror Channel fully funded this. Yeah, so Beyond the Rave, I suppose following on from When Evil Calls, we got to know the guys that have since taken over Hammer Films, you know, which are, again, I'm sure many of you know, the studio that was sort of founded in the 20s and launched Christopher Lee and all these people doing Dracula and things in the 50s. And Hammer has been taken over by 2 entrepreneurs, Simon Oakes and Mark Schipper. And what they really, I think, want to do with Hammer is sort of rejuvenate the brand and bring it to a whole new audience who maybe, you know, hadn't heard of it the first time around. And so we had lunch with Simon and Mark at Cannes last year in May with a one-page idea, you know, which was vampires and kick-ass music. That was basically sort of the pitch. And we didn't have a script, but they loved the idea, and they liked the idea that we could make it reasonably quickly, and, you know, help sustain the publicity sort of juggernaut that they created when they announced the relaunch of Hammer. So they agreed to fund it, and we set about sort of furiously writing this thing and simultaneously trying to cast it, with the idea initially that we would launch it at Halloween on the 31st of October last year, which in retrospect was a crazy thing to have promised. It was a bit like sort of shooting yourself in the head. The budget for this was a bit bigger again, so we ended up spending about $1 million on this. And the plan was also to launch it first on the internet and potentially also on mobile, and then to see what other distribution we could get on DVD and TV. I'll tell you a little bit more about the sort of distribution of it later on, but that was sort of the genesis of the project.
Did you have an alliance with MySpace, or did you just put it up on MySpace and promote yourself? Did MySpace help promote?
Yeah, we had a partnership with MySpace, and when we had, I mean, we were already some way into filming actually when we concluded that deal with them, but we had a formal sort of co-production arrangement, and they committed a lot of marketing to the project, which I'll talk about a bit later on. But yeah, it was a sort of formal thing. And in fact, it was their first original series outside the US. So the story of Beyond the Rave, it's about a soldier, Ed, who's due to go to war the following day, and he's given 12 hours of leave. And so in his final night before he heads to Iraq, he wants to have one last sort of good time with his girlfriend and his mates. And when he gets out of the barracks, however, he discovers that his girlfriend's gone missing, and he learns she's been hanging out with these travelers who've come into this town where they live and been throwing parties over the last few weeks. So what he's got to do is find out where she is and, spend this last night together. And to sort of cut a long story short, what emerges is that the travelers are vampires. So when they do in fact find this rave, all hell breaks loose, and they've got to get out there with their lives. That's a sort of basic idea. So it's a bit like, From Dusk Till Dawn meets Human Traffic. Tonally, we went for something that's quite sort of gritty, very contemporary. We didn't have any constraints in terms of the way that we had to approach this creatively, because it was going out under a sort of Hammer banner. We were given a very sort of free rein. So we wanted to make it feel youthful, contemporary, capture some of the sort of new rave scene that was been around in the last few years, and get a lot of new faces into the production. So in terms of the cast, Jamie Dornan was in Marie Antoinette, Sofia Coppola's film. He played Kirsten Dunst's lover. He's probably better known as a Calvin Klein model, but he's switched into acting, and that was his first role. But very talented guy. He's just sort of signed with CAA. So Jamie was the lead, Ed. Nora Jane Noon played his girlfriend, Jen, and she, I suppose, has a bit of a horror pedigree. She's been in all of Neil Marshall's films, Doomsday and The Descent, and she's a great actress. And Tamer Hassan has been in those Nick Love films, The Football Factory and Eastern Promises, the David Cronenberg movie, The Business. So he's used to playing sort of tough guys. And Tamer's character, we created this sort of local drug dealing gang called the Crockers, who feel that their territory is being encroached by these travelers. So what they do is they're at this rave trying to deal their drugs, and then they get involved in the battle against the vampires, and they've got shotguns and all sorts of other fun stuff. Sadie Frost, probably quite well known, and had of course been in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And so there's a wonderful scene in the film where, because Sadie apparently does trapeze, and so she was interested in seeing how she could work that into the story. So she plays a vampire in the series, and we have her up in the roof of this great big tall building, coming down on a bungee that we sort of created, and then she grabs a victim, bites his neck, and then they spring back up to the ceiling, which was a difficult stunt to get right. But we were thrilled to have her. Lois Winston, we wanted to work again after When Evil Calls. She's really fantastic, and she plays this sort of femme fatale in Beyond the Rave, who falls in love with a human and tries to persuade him to join the vampires. Les Simpson also has a bit of a horror background, works with Neil Marshall a lot. Jake Maskell from EastEnders plays a bad guy. Ingrid Pitt, I suppose, was our one nod to the old Hammer. You know, she was in some of those films in the 70s, and he has had an incredible career. She was in Where Eagles Dare, I think, with Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood. And Steve Sweeney was in Lock, Stock and Nil by Mouth. Phil Bush is the lead singer of the Cazals. Obviously, because it takes place at a rave, there's a strong musical element. So we wanted to cast a number of musicians. And I'll show you a scene that Phil is in. He plays a kind of a raver who meets a sticky end at the hands of this old, sort of 1,000-year-old dope-smoking vampire. Jackson Scott has had some sort of notoriety in gossip columns and things, and he's also a musician in real life. I'll talk a bit about maybe the story at this point, just before I talk about Matthias. But you know, one of the challenges of these sorts of series is really in the writing, and you know, how do you create meaningful entertainment in a 3-minute episode or a 5-minute episode? It's really tough, you know, and at the same time try to hold the audience with you as you move across a series of 90 minutes. So that it's striking that balance between something that's self-contained and overarching story arcs, and I think that's something that we have to continue to get better at, because it's a very new craft, and my brother who wrote this hadn't written one of these before, but I think one of the things you have to try to aspire to do is hold the audience's attention, and I think it might be sort of an easy way out, but what we try to do is give them payoffs in terms of either sort of violence or drama or action in each episode. I mean, I think the internet audience is a very impatient one. You've got 1,000 other places you can go at the flick of a button. It's not like being in a cinema or something. And so perhaps at the risk of being a little bit, over explicit sometimes, we thought we would go on the route of, action, 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 action. But at the same time, try to attach the audience interest in some of the characters and what would happen to them over the course of the series. But it's fair to say that, the nature of writing these things, I'm sure, is going to evolve a lot. It's quite new. In terms of key people on this, we were very lucky to work with Matthias Hohner as a director. Matthias is a very talented and experienced commercials director, and brought a fantastic sort of sensibility to the look of the project. And also, as you're trying to pull one of these things together for what is still a very small budget, really. We shot 120 minutes on Beyond the Rave, so and 220 people worked on the project. So it really is the size of a decent-sized independent film, I suppose. Yeah.
Did you shoot it in blocks, or did you shoot it in one go?
We shot the vast majority in one go, and then we came back and did some pickups when we wanted to add things to the story. But we basically filmed for about 4 weeks in September and October last year, all at night, or pretty much at night, which obviously has its own challenges. Everyone gets tired, and you're dealing with crises in the morning and the usual stuff, I guess, that happens on a night shoot. But then we came back and probably did an extra week around Christmas time just to add some bits.
With any ideas to put it together into a feature, or was it all intended to be discrete episodes?
Yeah, we always really approached this as an online series, but at the back of our mind was the idea that we might do a feature edit or a TV edit, a 60-minute TV edit. But it was written as an online series, and that's sort of how we thought about it. But we wanted it to be able to be played out in HD and on a big screen, and so you know, I was just amazed. At least when we did the cast and crew screening, we played it at a cinema, and without really doing anything to the material, you know, you could just literally blow it up to a cinema screen. And we shot on a very cam, in a nice HD camera.
And ran the episodes continuously.
Yeah, we played the whole thing out, but from a quality perspective, you weren't getting granulation or any of that. So you could just literally blow it straight up to the cinema. It's amazing. So anyway, Matthias was a good guy, and I think, you know, in terms of, if any of you are producers, you know, how to get the bang for your money and things. The wonderful thing I think for us about working with a talented commercials director was that those guys work so regularly that they're used to collaborating with all sorts of good people, and they can help you build your team. And he was fantastic at that. And in particular, the DOP that we had, you know, we wouldn't have found without Matthias. Another key person on the shoot was Pete Tong. So Pete was the music producer and chose all of the songs that went through the series. And what we're going to do now that it's been launched online is we'll probably release the soundtrack for Beyond the Rave. And Pete's involvement, I think, was another angle that helped us really build enthusiasm for the project and awareness. And I don't know how many people listen to his Radio 1 show, but I think it's 6 million or something crazy every week. So he was a key person in helping us build an interest and seeding the notion of the series in music-related sites. In terms of the score itself, we tried to have a mix of newer bands and older bands, but you know, some of these groups you may know: Digitalism, Vitalik, Teenage Bad Girl, all quite sort of popular dance acts now. And what we did with the music licensing was just say, look, you know, we can afford to pay this much for the rights to your song. Take it or leave it. And so we basically cut everyone the same deal, you know, and did it that way. So at this point, I was going to play a couple of clips, or at least the trailer and one clip. So let me just find that. We did 2 trailers for it. One was a teaser trailer, which was sort of almost designed to create kind of confusion. What is this thing, you know? And it wasn't branded. This one is much more sort of in your face. It's dance music, it's gore, it's action, rather than sort of, you know, subtlety and mystique. Let me just see. While I'm just pulling that up, I'll just show you the site that MySpace created. So you can access all the episodes in HD, and this was the first time they'd done a series in HD anywhere in the world, so that was quite exciting. But you can also play them in normal resolution, you know, for sort of loading times and things. I'll come back to this a bit later, but we got these very talented guys in New York. I think one of them, Lance Weiler, has been speaking either yesterday or today. Sees the media, so they created this game where they embedded clues into the video. So you have to sort of slow the video down to see, to get the answers to these clues and win points. And then the other component of the game is that you were able to battle vampires online and play other people, and you got points that way. And then the idea is that you build this sort of scoreboard, and the people with the highest scores can come to a physical event. So sort of trying to blend, you know, online virtual media and real world things.
Did you think about that when you were making the film? That just came up as you went along?
Yeah, this one we all did in post.
And the idea came up, you thought, I'll get Lance.
Well, actually, the MySpace guys suggested working with Lance, yeah. James Fabricant at MySpace had been on a panel with Lance, and that was a great experience. I mean, he's a super talented guy. So Yeah, I mean, the post on this, we took about 4 months in the end. We decided the Halloween would just be stupid to sort of go for that. So we ended up launching April 17, I think. So we had a reasonable chunk in post to think about the marketing and the seeding and all that sort of stuff, which again, I'll come back to. I've got a slide on that. But then on the site, we have character profiles on the 10 or 12 main characters. And we just put this up anonymously on MySpace. These individual videos we put up to see whether people would make the connections between the characters and what they were talking about. And some of them are pretty dark. The vampires are talking about loving blood and running around doing all this sort of nasty stuff to sort of see whether we could get a bit of a viral buzz. And we seeded some of those on horror sites and things like that. And then the music player, I think we've got about 35 tracks in this. And as you can see, I mean, I think, so there's been 410,000 plays so far of the music. Let me see if I can. So you can just listen to these for free. Let's see. Don't know if the volume is on here. Oh. Do you know where the volume might be, anyone?
I'm not sure. I need the. I will do.
Ah, yeah, good point. Ah, great. Well, it's still playing. Not to worry. I mean, we can. I mean, they're great dance tracks. Basically, is sort of what I was going to show you. We had some competitions that were running through the release of the series. So questions on vampire lore that some of the Hammer guys created for us, which were wonderful. And various sorts of prizes that we were running to drive interest in the run-up to release and during the series itself. Let's have a look. Let me just kick play again. Doesn't. Yeah, I think a bit of both. I mean, they were certainly keen to use the project to relaunch the Hammer brand. That was a big part of it. But I think businessmen that they are, they definitely had an eye on the bottom line from this. Oh, thank you. That's great.
So you can be the DA.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. So we had about like 35 tracks or something in this, and it's quite nice. You can see they're all. Music is obviously so important in a horror, creating suspense and stuff, as well as these very kind of active dance tunes. We've got some softer and more frightening pieces. Oh, well, this one's not coming. Anyway.
Would you ever make something free with having getting sold, or you'd always start with money first?
Well, personally, right now, we have to run a business. Well, we it's just about how you pay for, people's salaries and everything else. But, the first thing we did, we probably lost some money on, So I suppose it depends on your your motivation. But right now, we would have to see a very clear line to, at least having our costs covered in order to embark on a production. The sorts of, in terms of the business model for these sorts of things, I suppose, what you're hoping for is to get a number of sponsors on board to help underwrite the costs and maybe even make a profit with their involvement. So there's a sort of product placement element to that. There would be some kind of media buy. Yes. No, we didn't. And on this, it was kind of strange, I suppose, in the sense that Hammer were fully financing it. So as producers, once we heard that and knowing they wanted to launch it, very, very quickly, we were just kind of head down to make it. I think a more normal scenario might be that if you have a concept for one of these series, you could, and you manage to get the interest of someone like Bebo or MySpace, you might then go hand in hand with them to seek funding from sponsors. I mean, that seems to be the way that it's beginning to work, and to sell them in on placement and stuff. Obviously, the other form of revenue that you could get on this is television or DVD sales, and then I guess in terms of creating value in the IP, the idea that you could come back and remake it as a movie or TV series or whatever else.
Did Hammer produce any finance for the project?
Yeah, they fully financed it.
Fully financed it. So
yeah.
you used the production company, were they producing one source of finance all putting together?
Well, we were very involved in all the conversations that MySpace had with sponsors on behalf of the project, because once we'd made it, we did go out and try and raise sponsorship. But I think it is difficult to get sponsors on board when you can't offer product placement, and that's what we were having to do with this. And I think, if I'm honest, horror is a genre that doesn't appeal to every brand. I mean, it's pretty obvious stuff. But we took the decision with Hammer and MySpace that the integrity of the project was about, an 18-rated, pretty dark sort of horror show, and we didn't want to dilute that. But I think the consequence of that is you cut yourself off from a whole swathe of companies that just don't want to get involved with something like that. So I think as we try to structure our slate now and going forward, we've got many more projects that are either sort of comedies or dark comedies or action or thriller, but you sort of got to aim more at PG-13 or maximum 15, I think, really to play that commercial angle better.
So do you still own the rights, or do Hammer own the rights?
It's an interesting question. On this project, Hammer have the rights. On a more typical deal that we would do, we would look to retain the rights.
Why did Hammer decide to come in?
They came in right at the outset, when it was a one-page idea. As I say, we at Cannes last year, we pitched them, they loved it, and that's when they got involved. And MySpace got involved when we were some way into production. So to their credit, Hammer took the financing risk on this.
What was the cost?
About $1 million.
Can I just ask, did you have all your cast on board before you presented the project?
No, we didn't have anything. We had one-page sort of idea of the concept, but no director, no cast, and I suppose again it's a sort of reflection of the rather strange nature of this emerging content form. And with a movie or anything, a TV show, you'd have to have all of that thought through, I'm sure, to get the finance. But we haven't had a script for any of our projects when they've been financed. So I'm sure that's going to change. There are many, many more of these ideas out there now. It's rapidly maturing as a content form, and I know that there's still one or two things we might get away now without director or cast attached. I suppose in part on the basis that we've done it before, but I can't see it happening for very long. Yeah.
Can I ask, if you launched in April running, have you shown all the episodes? Are Hammer or yourselves trying to kind of further exploit the product?
Yeah, MySpace released it 2 episodes a week, so it played out over 10 weeks, and they launched it in 19 countries, and each one there was slightly staggered release dates. I think the UK and the US went out together, but you know, they can sort of geo-block it, so it's never perfect that, but more or less each country was launching to its own time frame. So it sort of played out online around the world for, I guess, 3-4 months, something like that. And you know, in some of the bigger markets, there were offline PR efforts accompanying those launches and trying to sort of sustain them. So we went to Sundance with Sadie Frost and Lois Winstone and the MySpace folks, and did quite a few interviews about it there. We had a press conference in Paris, and in the UK, the thing that was really exciting was that there was so much latent interest in Hammer and Hammer's resurgence that we were able to sort of ride that and get TV coverage. We were on all the national news channels with this, and I think MySpace as well, to give them credit, were fantastic at generating publicity. They're really good. There was like everyone was involved in that. MySpace played a very important role, yeah, and we had a PR agency as well.
But that was that funded out of the $1 million budget by MySpace?
No, there was a contribution above the $1 million to that probably Hammer and MySpace co-funded, yeah.
With your international launches, your non-English language ones, do you do subtitles?
Yes, we did subtitles rather than dubbing, yeah.
And is that why you geo-blocked it, so that you could do it on a language-by-language basis?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
How many views did you get?
Well, we haven't made that public. It's in the millions, but rather than the tens of millions. But we haven't made an exact figure public. And I think the thing that I would sort of say, you know, perhaps as a justification for why it's not in the tens of millions, is that some shows are promoted and the video opens automatically on the home page of the main site. You've seen that with some Bebo shows. The issue that we had, again, because this was 18, is you have to register to sort of log in and watch this content. So the content couldn't live and play out automatically on the homepage. You had to go to a specific site and find it. But it's done pretty well, and it has had a sort of multi-million view performance.
Normal 18 certifications.
Yeah, we did. I think we went to the BBFC. That's the right acronym, isn't it?
Was that because you're good citizens, or is it actually a legal requirement to do that?
Well, I think it's more because we were good citizens. Everyone, you know, MySpace in particular, wanted to make sure that, bless you, it's sort of above board, and you know, we were. Yeah, yeah.
It's a legal requirement if you want to play on the cinemas. It has to have a license.
Right. Yeah, I think they've got very rigorous safety policies and a whole team of people that look at the appropriateness of content, and that we had to cut 3 scenes out of this that they didn't deem to be appropriate internally, but we also thought we'd take the extra precaution of getting that sort of official stamp on it.
Can I ask about the interactivity?
Yeah.
How important was it to you in conceiving the project, and how successful do you think it was?
Well, to be honest, I mean, the core of it for us started with the idea of the story, you know, and I think that's probably what hooked Hammer. You know, how can we tell an interesting story here, and are there elements that appear to be, you know, marketable to the right sort of demographics that we wanted to hit, and music and horror seem to be the you know, nice anchors for that. Obviously, as we began to work more and more with MySpace and understand, you know, their audience, it became clear that building a community and having content that was above and beyond the video itself was critical. And if I just sort of scroll down to the last bit, I mean, we have nearly 30,000 friends of the project, and I think that I'm guessing, you know, a big part of it for those guys was the way that they could sort of communicate to each other about what they were seeing in advance of the release in terms of these character profiles, but what was going on in the game, do you want to play me on the game, that sort of element, as well as listening to the music. So I think in this space in general, it's an essential element. And when you're planning one of these sorts of shows, the second thing maybe that you'll get asked is, okay, so what are you going to do above and beyond the video to build a community? And as they're looking to generate a return for the advertiser and stickiness and all of that sort of stuff, it's going to how can you keep those consumers coming back to this site and spending time? So yeah, I think it's important. Well, I don't know. I suspect that the activity on the site has fallen off quite a lot, after the last episode was broadcast. But certainly our hope is that what we can do with any follow-up is take advantage of the fact that there are 30,000 people who are sort of actively involved with it, and of course many hundreds of thousands probably around the world who watched it and know about it.
Was it conceived for the episodes, or was that something that was decided?
Yes, it was always conceived as a short form series.
And did that work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we should be honest and say, like everyone, we're sort of still learning how that can work best in terms of storytelling and writing. But what we try to do is deliver some kind of payoff in each episode, or a bit of action, a bit of violence, a great story sort of development. But that's a difficult thing to do when you've got a 4-minute canvas on which to paint before you've got to move on. And one of the things that we did do, which I think was very useful, was give, at the beginning of each episode, we had a catch-up. So like 15 seconds, this is what happened before. So if you're coming in episode 12, you have some vague idea of what's gone on before. I guess like on, like on 24, or that previously on 24. So that's the site. Just play the trailer so you can see some of the video. Yeah, I mean, I think it's trial. It's all trial and error. I think at the moment, I don't think there's any, view on the best way to do it. I mean, I think we'd seen, MySpace certainly had experience of doing 3 a week in the States, and thought it would be better to play it out a little bit, longer based on that. But I know Bebo are doing 1 a day on certain shows, so I think it's. Everyone's just trying to get a sense of what's working. I don't think there's an exact science to it. But it is the case in general that I think you want to try to extend the audience's experience of a show across months rather than weeks. And in that sense, with something that's very expensive as an internet production, you kind of got to play it out a little bit. We couldn't afford to have shot 50 or 60 episodes like this. So let me just play the trailer. As I say, this is kind of the wham bam version. Hopefully this will sort of buffer a little bit. See if this works. Yeah. Let me just pause that and give it a moment to get a little bit of a buffer going.
Series 2?
Yeah, why not? I think Yeah, as I say, I mean, I think what we would have to do on a series 2 is make sure there were brands underwriting the cost, and therefore, you know, just look at the tone of it in order to make sure that was able to happen. But I think series 2 is one option. A feature film could be a much easier play, and I think that's probably more likely. You play it straight out as an 18, and I think that's probably more likely.
Is that more financially attractive as a model?
What to do a feature film? Well, I mean, I think, you know, everyone in this room, I'm sure, has got a view on that. But I think independent film is very difficult business. You know, there are a lot of people trying to make low budget movies without a great deal of success or reward. And I'd actually say what's exciting about this is that you really can reach a global audience, and I don't know many independent movies that have been made for $1 million that, you know, have launched in 19 countries and have had multi-million views. I mean, that you'd have to win Sundance and, you know, be literally one of the best sort of in the world that year. And I think the nice thing about this space is that it's still relatively new. You know, people have been doing this for maybe 2 years now, and there might not be hundreds of ideas. There's probably 10 or 20 or 30 ideas kicking around. That maybe 10 get made every year. So you still have a chance of playing your concept out to a big audience, and I think that's what's exciting about it. And as a company, you know, without having had a production background, you know, I think we've been able to sort of nimbly get things done because we focused on this area. Whereas if we tried to make movies, we would have been one of, you know, 1,000 producers. And
did you say what you're planning next? Are you doing it on a similar line?
yeah, we've got a few things in development, and we in fact we've just made a sci-fi show for Portal, which I'll be able to talk about next week. We're doing the press for it next week, but that's this. It's, you know, a big Portal we will all know, and that's their first sort of drama series as well outside the US. We're going into production in November on series 2 of a short form project, which again I can't talk about, but those are working with Endemol. And then we have our own projects. We have something called Los Lunas, which is it's a dark comedy. It's a bit like if you imagine the two protagonists from Pineapple Express, that new Seth Rogen comedy. Imagine them walking into No Country for Old Men. It plays out in the desert in New Mexico, and there's a sort of cast of motley characters that chase these two brothers across the desert. We've got a comedy called The Fantasist, which is about a guy he gets hypnotized, and every time he hears this jingle, he adopts a new personality. So it's a bit like Walter Mitty.
How are you financing these?
Well, they all have different backers, but what's nice, you know, is so many people want to dip their toe into this world. You know, that I can see us getting at least one of those financed by a broadcaster, perhaps to play out on their own, you know, website. I can see another one getting financed by a games console company, or at least partially financed. And then we have a couple of people in the States that are pitching projects on our behalf to advertisers. And I suppose that remains the most sort of traditional route to secure some kind of online distribution through a portal or a social network partnership, then pitch it to advertisers once you know you can sort of guarantee the audience to the advertiser. I think it's sort of.
So this comedy you're doing, that does it sound? I mean, it sounds great. It sounds not like the thing you were saying. This was always bang bang bang, shooting. So how did you get that? Is that episodic on the?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
How did you manage to do that? If you did your other things, did you have to always?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we might not deliver. You know, well, we obviously won't deliver violence every episode, but I suppose, you know, whatever the payoff is going to be, you know, perhaps it's a new persona that this guy adopts. Perhaps it's, well, obviously it's comedy, so we'd have to be doing gags, but I think you can play with a different sort of toolbox. But I think the principle remains the same, is that you've got impatient 16-year-olds flicking around all over the place, and how do you kind of keep those guys sort of coming back and hooked into the story, and that's the challenge.
Into that, a 16-year-old
I think everything that we do is somewhere between 15 and 30. You know, it's a pretty young audience, and I'm sure that's getting older by the day. You know, but I think that's where the core of our audience is. Am I running out of time? Oh, sorry.
We actually need to go to lunch. I guess if you want, since it's lunch, you could play the trailer and then we should leave.
Oh yes, the trailer. Well, let me do that, and then I'll be around during lunch. I'm sorry we've run out of time.
Thank you.